All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Angela Garrison, and I'm with Tomo Drug Testing. In today's world, the drug landscape is evolving faster than ever. New designer drugs and products specifically marketed to beat drug tests and appearing online and in stores every day. For treatment courts, probation programs, and child service agencies that rely on accurate drug testing to make critical decisions about safety, accountability, and recovery, understanding these emerging trends is more important than ever. Today's webinar is hosted by Tomo Drug Testing. We partner with treatment courts, community supervision programs, employers, and child welfare agencies to support reliable drug testing programs and provide responsive client support. Our goal is to help the professionals doing this important work have the tools, information, and testing solutions they need to make informed decisions and protect the communities they serve. We are very fortunate today to be joined by Donald McNeil, a forensic sciences advisor with Redwood Toxicology Laboratory at Abbott Laboratories. That's a mouthful. Mr. McNeil is the former director of forensics at Ascertain Forensics and a retired supervisor from the Glendale Police Department. As a supervisor of the DUI-DRE program, he developed the Office of Traffic Safety funded Drug Abuse Recognition Program, currently administered by California Narcotic Officers Association. As a narcotic officer, he worked every position from undercover operator to that of a Los Angeles Regional Drug Task Force commander. He has testified as an expert witness on matters tied to drug impairment on more than 200 occasions. He possesses an undergraduate and graduate degrees in biology and is a former California Narcotics Officers Association Officer of the Year. He is a graduate of the P.O.S.T Command College and has taught as adjunct faculty at California State University, Los Angeles, and California State University, Long Beach. We are very grateful to have his time and expertise today, and we are very excited for the insights he's going to share. As just a housekeeping note, we are going to take questions throughout. So if you do have a question, please just use the chat function there at the top, and we'll jump in and get that question asked, and we will have some dedicated Q&A time at the end. So with that, Don, welcome.
Thank you, Angela, for the introduction. And as always, it's a great pleasure to be here with Tomo today. Tomo and Abbott are great partners in providing the services that are necessary, for drug courts, probation, and all folks working in the treatment setting. So very happy to be here. And again, as Angela said, please jot down your questions. I think we'll have adequate time here built into the presentation to address those. We won't be able to get and touch on every topic near and dear to your heart today. I wish we could. We just don't have enough time for that, but we're trying to truncate into the things that seem to be mattering the most right now in what we call our evolving landscape. And I'm an old guy. I'm retired out of law enforcement here in Los Angeles, where I am today. I was a commander here and former DRE instructor. So I come from that world, and I was reminiscing a bit with the Tomo staff here about what life was back in the 2000s and the 10s and up to about 2018, and boy, has our world changed. And the diversity of drugs and analytes that we now have to be cognizant of and be able to react to in our world has changed significantly. The old days. When I speak very fondly of the old days, where we had heroin, the amphetamines, methamphetamines always, and a little bit of cocaine, sprinkled with some marijuana. That was our world. And once in a while we'd have a notorious case emerge involving like PCP, phencyclidine, the early dissociative anesthetics. That was it. And now the various categories that we must contend with, from a toxicology lab perspective, but more importantly, what you have to deal with in your caseloads is mind-numbing. So you have to be a student of this and paying attention to the latest in trends and events and trying to figure out, okay, what we heard in the news tonight on the national news, of course, national news is about selling advertising space. Is this going to be something, is this just something today? Or is this something that's going to morph into something tomorrow that we really have to pay attention to? So we're going to try to work through that today and talk about some related areas such as drug detoxification and trying to beat a drug test. We'll weave that in there as well. Okay, so let's get going. So at the end of the day, all this change impacts testing decisions, right? So as I mentioned, we see the news, we read the news, and there seems to be something that, important in our world occurring daily. Just a few days ago, the president said that he's going to hit the tripwire that's going to allow for the greater exploration of hallucinogenic drugs to be used to treat depression, PTSD, and other syndromes akin to that. That's huge. And this has happened in the last 5 to 10 years, the influence of hallucinogenic therapy, if you will, in psychiatric medicine. This is it. It's frightening and it's exciting at the same exact instant. But these are the events that permeate our world, and they seem to be happening, if not weekly, they seem to be happening daily. Cannabis, the president and the administration, the current administration, trying to move cannabis from a Schedule 1. I'm not talking about synthetic cannabinoids at this point. Organic cannabinoids, moving them from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 to permit more expansive testing. And I say testing in the sense of clinical testing as to what can these drugs do. So, boy, this is big change, and we've got synthetic drugs that have become quite the annoyance in our lives. In the opioid category, we'll go through that here today. The depressants like the benzodiazepines, we have crazy new analytes emerging there. The hallucinogenic drugs, of course, and the dissociative anesthetics, ketamine, PCP, and, if you will, drugs such as etomidate. What do they mean? Do we really have to get our pants in a twist over this, or are these just all tempests in a teapot? Okay, so we want to be able to evaluate what's going on, stay ahead of the curve, and as a laboratory, developing methods. That's our job here, is to develop methods as we see these trends evolving. So that is our challenge. So we have to go through the same kind of calculus as you do, as to, okay, do we need to test for this stuff or not? Well, we have to come up with the tests so that you can make that decision. So all of us have roles to play. Now, these phenomenon, they do vary by region. So out west here, we share a lot of what we see here in California with you folks there in Texas. Okay, so fortunately, you don't share our taxes or our gas prices, but you do share a lot of our drug trends. So some California lessons will apply to you guys. But on the East Coast, things are very, very different. And typically where we see new drugs and trends evolve, it's out of the East Coast. And I hate to say it, Philadelphia seems to be the brunt of it all. So as things occur there, they have a tendency to flow west out, ultimately ending with us. Okay, well, and the Hawaiians, but they're a different story altogether. So I'll walk you through some of the things that I believe, we believe are important enough to be discussed. Our odyssey in substance abuse and the various public health crises that we've experienced over the years is interesting, right? So you look back into the mid-90s when medicalized cannabis and cannabis legalization really got its go. And I hate to say it, California was kind of in the lead on that idea. And so legalization efforts in cannabis then kind of gave way to the whole opioid epidemic. I saw today that that finally Purdue Pharma, the original manufacturers or producers of OxyContin, their settlement is criminal settlements about to be finalized. That started the opioid epidemic, right? So it was oxycodone in a time-release version called OxyContin that was the precipitator, if you will, of all this. So where we are today with fentanyl can be traced all the way back to that, unfortunately. So we made it through the oxycodone era into where we are now, which is fentanyl, and then which then triggered a designer drug proliferation. So we got the fentanyls, right? And then we got the fentanyl analogs. So of which there were probably at its zenith, there were about 25 of them that were out and about in the drug supply. Now it's now kind of titrated down to 3 or 4, which is a good thing. Okay, we're not seeing too many new ones emerge. We are seeing other classes of opioids emerge, the nitazenes, for instance, and then recently in the news, some stuff called cyclorphine, or what's referred to as the orphine class. Don't take notes. We'll get to those in a few minutes, but just to show you where we are in the timeline. And then kind of coming in from, country roads into this timeline are things like the synthetic cannabinoids, right? These are drugs that we see a lot of in the institutions. Okay, they are the proximate cause of many deaths in prisons and jails. Our lab last year, we handled several from prisons out on our central coast. They all occurred right around the same time. They presented the same way. They were the synthetic cannabinoids, all right? They were smuggled in by way of paper products, dissolved into paper products, and they were smoked or just chewed and eaten inside the 4 walls of the institution. So we have polydrug use, the mixture of all sorts of different drugs together. And as a DUI lab, we would see this routinely in our DUI cases. We would see the norm was 2.7 analyzed per case. So you had 2 drugs plus 3/4 of another, if you want to average it. We're in all of our DUI drug cases, THC being the most common analyte, and then build on it from there. So the amphetamines probably were number 2, and then a lot of prescription drugs, gabapentin. That sound familiar? The gabapentinoid drugs, and there's a sister drug called Lyrica or pregabalin. They are both very prominent nowadays. And why is that? Well, physicians trying to come up with medications that have less of an onerous effect than the opioids. They've turned to the gabapentinoids. Okay, so instead of prescribing hydrocodone or oxycodone or tramadol, an opiate, the risk profile is less by prescribing these gabapentinoids. Now, though, these drugs get diverted and they get mixed with cannabis. They get mixed with alcohol. They get mixed with all these other substances that users have choices to make from. And now we've got a polydrug mess on our hands, okay? So today we'll talk about the fentanyls. I think we'll lead off. The lead-off hitter spot will be those guys. Then the novel synthetic opiates, NSOs, if you will. Those are the nitazene drugs and the stuff cyclorphine, the orphines, which were in the national news a couple of weeks ago. Then xylazine and medetomidine. Now, these are technically adulterants mixed in with fentanyl on the street, okay? Almost always seen mixed with fentanyl, rarely seen alone, okay? We'll explain why in the world would you take these drugs, which are anesthetics for either animals in veterinary medicine or a version of medetomidine used to treat humans. Why would we do that? These are anesthetics. They put you to sleep. What's the value of doing that if your intent is to experience an opiate high? We'll run that down to you. The cannabinoids, holy mackerel, this group is jumping. We have, of course, organic cannabis, right? The old sativa, sensimilla, all the different kush, all the different strains of cannabis still around, and a lot of it around. But now we have these hemp-derived cannabinoids. Now that's the Delta 8, the Delta 10, 11, HHC, THCA. These all come from hemp. So they are cannabinoids, but they come to us through a different creative process. They do the exact same thing as cannabis, Delta 9 does, but just slightly differently, all right? Parenthetically here are the synthetic cannabinoids. So they belong in this discussion, but they're completely laboratory-based, okay? They do not come from weed. They do not come from hemp, all right? Then we'll hit the synthetic cannabinoids, sorry. Too many multisyllabic words here. So the synthetic cannabinoids, they are based, chemically based on a stimulant drug out of sub-Saharan Africa, the khat plant, and that's KHAT. So if you take the chemical structure of the of khat, and you modify it to some extent or another, you come up with a synthetic version of it. It's a stimulant still, except it's more potent. So synthetic cannabinoids, and those are very spotty in terms of regionalization. So the southeast part of the United States, Florida was probably ground zero for the synthetic cannabinoids, still is, but they have spread. Then the hallucinogens. Okay, so LSD, right, was our hallucinogen of choice for generations, popularized by Timothy Leary, right? And then the mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms, to some extent mescaline, not a worry today, but it's mushrooms of a couple of different types right now that we'll talk about, traditional psilocybin and then what we call amanita or muscarinic mushrooms. They do different things, hallucinogens, but they just do different things. So, and then ketamine, okay, special K, dissociative anesthetic, very closely related to PCP, but has great use, very effective drug nowadays to treat depression, especially refractory depression, that which really isn't doing well with any other medication. Ketamine can sometimes kind of reset the system. Walk you through that too. The gas station heroin, bodega heroin, or insert, you can call it opiate, I guess, tianeptine and kratom. Okay, tianeptine is prescription medicine out of Europe, but it has opioid qualities, and then kratom is a supplement, if you will, and that's what it's been sold and marketed as, but has become extremely dangerous to us because of two alkaloids in it. One is 7-hydroxy or 7-OH mitragynine. The other is some stuff, mitragynine pseudo indoxyl or MPI. They're both much more powerful than mitragynine alone. And so these products have proliferated real fast throughout the country, okay? And then we'll get to inhalants, and not on our little list here are different things we can do, products to ostensibly beat a drug test, if that's possible. We'll walk you through that. Okay, so here we are with the fentanyls. And I say fentanyls plural, it's because we have fentanyl plus the fentanyl analogs. Okay, so right now, the fentanyl analogs of concern, one is acetylfentanyl, the other is parafluorofentanyl. So they all end with fentanyl, right, in the name. So they're fentanyl at their core. What differentiates them from fentanyl itself is that they're more potent. Okay, they don't last any longer in terms of their duration of effects. They're just more potent. And when we say potent, that's a formula that evaluates how well an opiate binds to a set of opiate receptors in the body. And we have three basic sets of them. Okay, one, the one of most importance is what we call the mu receptor. It's the principal receptor for opiates, and fentanyl, takes that over, that receptor over like a pirate, and no one else can get on it. It locks that receptor down and energizes it better than really any other opiate we are aware of, except for some of the new novel ones. They are more potent than fentanyl, and that's the scare. So fentanyl is still by far the predominant opiate in our drug supply in the United States. We do see, these analogs popping up. We have recently, in the last year or so, seen carfentanil take off. Okay, so carfentanil was really the first fentanyl to make it into the news probably 15 years ago. All right, this is elephant tranquilizer, if you will, kind of a pejorative, but it's a large animal tranquilizer is what carfentanil is. And so it is, I believe, like 10,000 times the potency of morphine at the opiate receptor, okay, which puts it several hundred times more potent than fentanyl at the receptor. I think it's even more than that. Anyway, it's more potent, much more potent. And so when you take a large animal sedative narcotic like this and introduce it to humans, what do you think happens? Okay, bad things happen, right? Overdose. So we see carfentanil mixed in to a small extent with fentanyl products. So the producers, manufacturers are spiking street fentanyl with a little bit of carfentanil. Okay, so this problem we have with the fentanyls, opioids, is not going away, and it's a matter of economics largely. Fentanyl has supplanted heroin. We rarely see heroin on the street. Very small pockets of large cities will still have heroin. Like in Los Angeles, our downtown area in Los Angeles, our Skid Row, if you will, yes, you can still find heroin there. There's a demand for it. But fentanyl just made it too easy. If you're going to manufacture heroin, you have to grow what? Opium. You got to have opium to start with. And so that means that you have to have fields and plantings that you must maintain and hide from law enforcement. This is largely done down in Mexico. And you expose yourself to law enforcement much more than if you were to just get your precursors for fentanyl from China, small lab in Mexico. You've reduced your footprint, your profile, and you can bang out much more fentanyl, many more fentanyl doses than you can heroin doses. It's economics. So I don't see heroin coming back. I think we're stuck with fentanyl. I could be proven wrong, but I think on this one, I am right. It's a fast-acting drug. That's what makes it good as a prescription drug or used in the hospitals. It's short-acting, which is also good in the hospitals, and well-studied drug here, been around since the late 1940s. Okay, but with fentanyl, with that fast onset and fast elimination, you create frustrations for the user, and that is the duration of my high is short, right? So heroin, you are in that 4 to 5 hour kind of time frame for your opioid effects. Fentanyls are in that 1 to 2 hour kind of time frame. Now, what does that ultimately cause to happen in response? Well, that's what gave us the rise of xylazine and now medetomidine. They were added in to give fentanyl what we call longer legs, or what many users call longer legs. The duration of effects are longer and more in that 4 to 6 hour that users experience with heroin. I don't want to take too much away from medetomidine and xylazine yet. We'll get to them in a second. Okay, so fentanyl on the streets, we see still sold in these counterfeit oxys, these counterfeit oxy 30s. They're kind of bluish green and single scored on one side. Some of them even have OC on there for OxyContin. On the back side, it'll say 30. Okay, so what that means is that this is an OxyContin, ostensibly, OxyContin 30 that releases over a 12-hour period of time. Okay, it's a spatialized time release. But that's not what it is, right? It's fentanyl. And sometimes mixed in there with the fentanyl is xylazine. And we'll find other kind of weird things that are just mostly filler that include stuff such as Tylenol. We see lidocaine. We see diphenhydramine, Benadryl. They're all mixed in here. But the primary constituent is, of course, is fentanyl. So you take that drug and it's not time release anything, it's instant release, and boom, so you get the fentanyl xylazine high. Now, one of the hazards with fentanyl use compared to heroin is that tolerance, okay, develops very quickly with the use of the fentanyls. Okay, so what is tolerance exactly? Well, tolerance is the need to take an ever-increasing amount of a drug in order to achieve the same effect. So in distilling this down, it just means I'm going to have to use more of this over time in order to get the high that I'm seeking as time goes by. So this process of developing tolerance happens faster with the short-acting narcotics because you're using them more often. The interval is greater. Therefore, the tolerance develops faster. Just to show you how much has changed in a short period of time. When I started with the forensic lab here 7 years ago, we would see a case in blood toxicology, in a DOI, and for that matter, postmortem. Let me just go to postmortem. It makes it even easier. Back in 2020, 5 nanograms of fentanyl found in a blood specimen in a postmortem case was almost always fatal. Those were classic opioid overdose cases. Okay, but over time, tolerance developed. Correct. So we set a record, or the driver set a record, if you will. About 1.5 years ago, a fellow was being pursued by the CHP and state park rangers up on our Central Coast. He was a local drug dealer out of the Central Coast area, but he goes on a high-speed pursuit, crashes his car, gets out of his car, goes on about a 1/4-mile foot pursuit, being chased by the officers, who finally tackle him. He fights with the officers. He's taken into custody. All right. His toxicology was 132 nanograms of fentanyl. So we went in about a 5-year period of time where 5 nanograms was equitable to a fatality, overdose fatality, to 132, where you've got a guy runs from the police, gets in a foot pursuit, then fights with them, struggles with them before arrested. So that is an exhibition in tolerance right there. So that's what's happened, and again, is the segue for these additive drugs like medetomidine and xylazine. Okay, so the carfentanyl thing, guys, we don't know where it's going. Again, it was something that we saw back about a decade ago. It peaked right around there, and it's always been there at a very low level. But just suddenly, in the last 6 to 9 months, in the various reports that we get from forensic labs, we've seen that number spike significantly. So we're just going to have to watch that one, see where it goes. It's just made fentanyl products on the street more dangerous. You could be aware of this last class down here, the cyclorphines. Or cyclorphine, which is a part of the orphine class of opiates. Where that's going to go, we don't know. It's in the news. Tennessee, state of Tennessee, I think was the first to publish a bulletin about this class of opiates. They're similar to these guys here, which are the nitazenes or the nitazenes. They are distinctly different from the fentanyls structurally, from just a structural chemistry and an analytical perspective. They are different. If you're into that stuff, they're the benzylbenzimidazole class. Just easier for us to say nitazenes or nitazenes. Okay. Now, they were researched back in the 50s as potential analgesics, as potential narcotics to be used medicinally, but their risk profile was, if you will, too risky. So they didn't make it to market, although I think there were a couple that came ultimately arose as fungicides. How they did that, I don't know, but that happened. So they've been in the book, these big books we carry around of drugs and chemicals and analytes in man, like this big red one here, which is our Bible. So they've been in there, the formulas and the chemistry notes, so anybody with a bit of a chemistry background could go back and, start from, take the recipe out, start from the beginning and make these drugs. And that's what's happened. So we have a few in circulation today. They're mentioned there: metanitazene, pyrrolidinoprotonitazene, and etonitazene. Quite a trio, huh? Say those, to be part of a roadside DUI check, right? Is see if you can pronounce these drugs 3 times quickly. Hard to do. They're powerful drugs, more potent than fentanyl by some degree, although it varies widely from product to product. Just understand, if you're testing for an opioid, if you've got an opiate assay in one of your drug tests, you're not going to capture these drugs, and you're not going to capture the fentanyls. You have to be testing specifically for fentanyls, and if you're checking for nitazenes, for the nitazenes. Okay, so you just have to ask your lab provider, and your Tomo or us, hey, I'm concerned about the nitazenes. Do I have a test available to me? And we'll be happy to answer you there. So we only see these drugs mixed with fentanyl. Okay, well, there have been 1 or 2 cases where we found just nitazenes alone, what we call neat, without a fentanyl. They're usually a minor constituent of a fentanyl product. So it's, again, like our fentanyl, meant to spike it, okay? Give it a little bit more oomph, okay, to the user, especially if they've become tolerant to the product they've been using. Okay, how do we kind of get beyond that tolerance hump? Well, we put a little something more potent in there. You could do it with carfentanil. You can do it with these guys here. You could do it with that cyclorphene, the orphines, if you could find it on the street. They'll all do that, okay? And you mix in a little bit of xylazine or medetomidine, and boom. Now you've got something that's going to last, 5-6 hours, and you're going to get over that hump. If you've seen photos of places like Philadelphia, and what is it, Kensington District in Philadelphia, and you see people that they seem to have stopped in mid-step, okay? They might be standing at a crosswalk waiting to get across the street, but they're completely bent over at the waist, and they're out like a light, okay? That is the classic mixture of a fentanyl with one of these guys, okay? They're anesthetized, literally, and are out cold, mid-step. And you'll see them with sitting on the sidewalk, eating a piece of food, a hamburger, and it's stopped in their mouth, and they're frozen there, okay? That is the combination of the fentanyl opiate with this anesthetic, or one of these 2 anesthetic drugs, all right? Gives them legs. Now, xylazine is usually veterinary medicine diverted. So it's a veterinary drug used, I recently had to put down, euthanize my Sheltie, if you ever want to get in a conversation about Shelties, you found a partner right here. But I had to put my guy down, and so he was given a mix of xylazine and medetomidine by the vet, and they were very effective. Okay, and he went peacefully, and it was as good as it was going to get. Right now, there's a dexmedetomidine. It's an isomeric version of this for humans. Yes, there is, but it's still largely, this stuff is diverted from the veterinary world into drug mixtures on the street. And what we call it is trank dope. And trank dope because of just what I described to you. The user is knocked out mid-step, mid-thought, mid-act, and that's what is now being sought. Now, when these analytes first started to emerge within the fentanyl using populations, they hated it. They didn't want the xylazine. They didn't want the medetomidine. They wanted just give me the opiate. That's what I'm after. Leave me alone. But then once it was realized that, hey, these drugs are going to extend your effects. Well, okay, we'll give it a go for a while. And over time, you develop a tolerance to this stuff. So you have a tolerance to the opiate, you have a tolerance to this alpha-2 agonist class of anesthetic. So again, you need to use more in order to achieve the same effect. And that becomes very hazardous as you run into the potential for overdose. Now understand, you can reverse an opiate overdose with naloxone, correct? So a fentanyl, a nitazene, an orphine, they'll all respond to naloxone. Now, you might have to use repeated doses, 4 milligrams, 4 milligrams, 4 milligrams, but you can reverse it. You can't reverse this. There is no reversal agent that's available, especially in EMS settings, to reverse the sedative effects or the tranking effects of the medetomidine and xylazine, which makes them exceptionally dangerous. Okay. Now, if you want to determine whether or not these particular drugs are part of your drug supply toxicologically, you're going to have to request tests that include xylazine and or medetomidine. Right now, if you're testing for xylazine, you're probably okay because we see much more of that than we do medetomidine. But medetomidine is on the rise. Will it replace it? Probably not replace xylazine, but you're going to want to keep your eye on this one. All right. Come on. Move. There we go. All right. So animal tranquilizers, exactly. Public health issue. People who are injecting fentanyl that is adulterated or in concomitant use with these two drugs, they develop routinely skin ulcerations and lesions that become horrendous. And they become infected and they result often in limb loss. So I know here in Los Angeles, I have a son he's a LAPD sergeant and a DRE, and he and his guys and gals are out and about with users of these drugs. And the number of people that they encounter with amputations of fingers, toes, amputations at the knees from people that have been injecting fentanyl comboed with xylazine and medetomidine is significant. And that is at the end of the day, what makes it just so tragic is that despite that, these folks will go back immediately out of the hospital, right back to using. So it is very distressing. But the rotting tissue and skin ulcerations are very common. All right, they will heal if treated, and they stop taking the xylazine. We don't know why this is happening. Let's get to that point. Okay, what is it about xylazine and to some extent medetomidine that causes circulatory problems that result in these lesions and amputations and infections? Not sure. We just know it is happening. Okay, so it's more than anecdotal, and I know that there's research underway back east in a couple of different places, universities, looking at this, but we're still not sure. Okay, I got a new keyboard, and wacky stuff is happening. So I'm going to do something here. There we go. My apologies. Now, all right. Gear change on you here. Quick note about the benzos. Okay, the benzodiazepines, tried and true. The grandfather or great grandfather in this drug class is diazepam, also known as Valium. Okay, Valium was actually the second. The first was Librium, but anyway, they're all drugs of the same class. A 1950s drug, 1960s drug. It goes back a ways. The Rolling Stones, and in fact, pushed out a song, "What a drag it is to get old. Mother goes running for the shelter of her little yellow helper." I forget the title of the tune, but it was all about Valium. Okay, little yellow helper was 5 milligram diazepam, or yes, 5 milligram is yellow. So now in our modern age, we've got these designer benzos. What does designer mean? Well, kind of what happened with the nitazenes, where you pull the book out and go back and look at the old formulas and create a new one. That's what's happened. So you take one of our most common today prescription benzos, which is Xanax, right? Alprazolam. Well, if you go through a process we call fluorination, you create a fluoride version of it, and you have flualprazolam. So that's exactly what's happened. So, or brominate it, we have bromazolam. So you hear that azepam, azolam in the last name, or the chemical name. That's going to tell you it's a benzo. Okay, they reduce anxiety, anxiolytic. They can be used to bring about sleep. They can also be used to treat muscle spasm. Very good and safe drugs. But we've created now these designer variants that are more potent. So they may be anywhere from 2 or 3 times up to 25 times more potent than the great grandpa diazepam itself. There's some of the names out there. Bromazolam, I think that you're number 2 there, is the most common at the moment. Flualprazolam is, I think, still in the top 5. And then the last one there, dialkylgidazepam, is I think in that top 5 too. So this does change from time to time. They'll change positions. First goes to 5th, and then 5 falls out, and another one jumps in, and atizolam is gone, and then it's back. And so this movement goes on all the time. Okay, so we see in the pills on the street. I don't know if I have a Xanax stick picture in this one. I do not. But you have these fake 1 milligram Xanax sticks that are on the street. Okay, they're not Xanax. They're not alprazolam. They're flualprazolam, usually with fentanyl. Okay, and they're deadly. If you think you're buying a Xanax stick and suddenly you're a naive opiate user, or you're naive to opiates, and suddenly you've got like 2 milligrams of fentanyl aboard, boom, lights out. So particularly dangerous if you're out there searching for a benzo and you take it on faith that what you were just sold is a benzo. Well, that's pretty darn risky. So again, these drugs seen on the streets, usually mixed with the opioids, and then apart from that, not so much. Okay. Still, you got problems with Xanax itself. That drug gets diverted. A popular drug, mild. They're all relatively short acting except for diazepam, but for some folks, that's exactly the high that's being sought out, is what a benzo can deliver. Okay, all right. How am I doing on time? I am a little bit behind. I will speed up. marijuana. I could go on here for a good hour. It's kind of a hobby area for me, being a former DRE and a person who goes to court to testify. Marijuana is always difficult for juries. People want to see in DUI cases, hey, like alcohol, why can't we have like a 0.08 correlate for THC? Just give me a number that I know, hey, if it's 4 nanograms per milliliter in blood of parent THC, then I know it's, a DUI case. Not going to happen. It's never going to happen. Okay. It's just so user dependent. And here in terms of how people are affected by cannabis, and B, the products in terms of their THC content are all over the map. Okay, so you have, contrasted here is a dab. So that's essentially a tincture. It's an extracted oil that's probably in the high 90s percent of delta 9 THC. Okay, that's like super cognac right there. And then you've got just regular old sativa, sensimilla without the seeds on the right, which is probably somewhere in the area of 15, 16% THC. So you go all the way from that up to the most rarefied 96, 97% THC. There's a big difference, right? So, back in I went to college in the late 70s and early 80s, okay? And cannabis back then, back in my time in school, was 3 or 4% THC. Now, I must admit, I've never smoked marijuana. I missed out on that, so I don't know. I haven't personally experienced this, but I have a lot of anecdotal evidence that I can draw upon. But you're going to be very differently impacted by something that's 90% versus something that's 15%. So nowadays we have the menu items are endless for cannabinoids. We had the hemp farm bill go through 7-8 years ago. All right, that allowed very low THC product defined as hemp to be processed essentially apart from the law, so hemp could be used commercially, right? Well, what that led to were people that took the hemp and CBD and through a process of conversion created delta 8 THC, delta 10, and these other critters you see there, HHC, THC. So they are very similar to delta 9. Usually not quite as strong, but like with HHC, it appears that it is at least as strong as delta 9. So they fall in this weird gray area of, well, they don't come from, organic cannabis. They come from the hemp plant. So if it's hemp, it's legal. If it's delta 9, it's not legal. Or if it's delta 9, it's controlled. But so where are we? Where does that leave us with these products? And they are in beverages. They are in edibles. And I just saw some data coming out of Texas. I think it was your poison control people, just a few days ago, where with adolescents and kids, the poison control calls there in Texas have skyrocketed in the last couple of years. And if anybody wants that, I think I've got the study actually in print. Happy to share. And why is that? Well, it's because of the proliferation of edibles. They're just easier to get your hands on. These edibles are all this delta 8, delta 10 stuff. So Bud Light, it's sometimes called, or diet weed, because it has a lighter touch than delta 9 does. Okay. Well, that might be true, but if you eat enough of this, smoke enough of it, drink enough of it, you're going to become impaired by it. The last few years, I've been involved in what we call green labs here through our forensic laboratory, where we would hook up with local law enforcement and traffic safety people, and we'd get people inebriated. They'd either smoke, drink, eat a cannabis product, and then we would evaluate them using DRE methods, to determine impairment. And we were in all of our labs. We introduced one beverage, So somebody had to drink the beverage. And our participants, all volunteers, were all veteran cannabis users. Nobody came into a green lab who was not or you couldn't come into the program as a novice to cannabis. So these were veteran folks, right? They were all blown away by the impact that the cannabis beverages had on them, how fast the high came on and how long the high lasted through the beverage. Again, these are people who've been around the block a few times. So just to keep that in the back of your mind, beverages are not safe, and or they're not safer, if you will, and should be used with great caution. Okay. All right. So we've talked Delta 8. I did put a Journal Association citation here there in the middle. Was published earlier this year about medical marijuana and just marijuana in general. Okay, is there evidence at this point in time for use of cannabis to treat medical indications? And the conclusion was insufficient evidence. So even though we have, it seems to be that we're just run over by research and literature and claims that cannabis can do X or Y or Z for a condition. It's not supported by the evidence, at least at this time. Okay, we do know that there are prescription versions of the cannabinoids that are used to treat nausea and vomiting related to chemotherapy. Yes, that has been proven, that has been established. Okay, also for appetite stimulation. Now, just kind of a turn of the table here. One of the things that we see in the emergency room departments nowadays from cannabis users is what's called cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. Okay, hyper vomiting. People that present in the ER unable to stop vomiting, and it go on for days. And it has been coined cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, and believed to be due to the fact that modern cannabis products are so much more potent nowadays, where that 4 to 5% THC is now up in the 90s, and it's led to these kinds of phenomenon. And my other son is an emergency room doctor, the yin and yang in my family, pretty close to where my one son works at LAPD, and he sees this in his emergency department, and they can pick them out. They've now become pretty good at diagnosing it, but had no idea what it was. They weren't asking the right questions, nor were they running toxicology. Now they do both, and they usually figure it out. And unfortunately, there isn't much that they can do to treat it, to stop it. Anyway, okay. So cannabis and the semi-synthetics, let's go to the synthetics. All right, now, doesn't come from hemp, doesn't come from cannabis. These are derived from a laboratory process. Now, which is, you think, all right, well, it's synthetic and it's just doing what cannabis does. How bad can it get? Well, very bad, because these drugs are much more potent at these cannabinoid receptors we have in our bodies. We call them CB1 and CB2. Each one kind of confers a different set of responses. So the syncans, just contraction of synthetic cannabinoids, how about that? So the syncans lock those receptors down, like I described earlier with fentanyl and the opioid receptor. They do the same thing at these cannabinoid receptors. And as a result, you get very kind of off-target, unexpected, unwanted effects. So you get agitation and restlessness. Blood pressure is up. You get muscle tremors, eyelid tremors, muscle tremors, or kind of a clonus. Hyperemesis, the vomiting. Hallucinations. That's what we see with the synthetic cannabinoids. And over time, they became kind of the go-to in the institutions for those, in custody. Easy to smuggle in on paper. And then we began to see deaths associated with these drugs in the jails and prisons. So this has gone unabated. Again, national news here a couple weeks ago, front page Wall Street Journal, New York Times. The dominant strains right now, and they have been for a while now. At the very bottom there, you have 5-fluoro-ADB and MDMB-40 and Panaca. Those two, if you're testing for those, and most laboratories do not, if you're testing for synthetic cannabinoids, and you should be, you have to make sure that the analytes they're testing for are the ones in common circulation, not the ones that were first identified a decade ago. They're long gone. They flew the coop. So it's these critters here, 5-fluoro and MDMB-40N. You have to be testing for those, and I think you'd be surprised at what your results will be. They are more proliferate than we thought. Okay, moving on down the road. Designer stimulants, almost always the cathinones. There's a few designer amphetamines out there, but most of them are of this ilk here. So they emulate cat, K-H-A-T there, the name. And the one that we are paying most attention to right now is some stuff called MMC. So it's methylmethcathinone, MMC, right? Methylmethcathinone. That's the one we're most drawn to at the moment. We detect the most, and some other stuff called 2-fluoro-2-oxo-PCE. You don't even have to remember. You don't have to remember names. Just remember that the cathinones are abused. They are regionally pocketed. I don't think Texas is much of a hotspot for them, but they do surround you a little bit. So it's just be aware of these. Were called bath salts when they first came to market, and that's because if you look at the picture there, they do kind of look like bath salts, right? But that's not what their intended use is. So they're intended to be crushed up, dissolved, and injected to get a stimulant high. Really not that much different than methamphetamine, except there's a hallucinogenic component to these drugs. And they've had some really kind of crazy case reports out of the field because they do have a partially dissociative anesthetic effect. So you may hallucinate, hear things, see things that aren't there, and can trigger underlying psychosis. Again, do we see these things with the amphetamines? Yeah. Long-term meth users, yep, they can kind of devolve into that, right? But the cathinones can get you there much faster. Okay, so some of the early ones here were dimethylpenolone and eudalone, but the ones that MMC is the one I would be worried about right now. Okay, that key does not work. All right, the hallucinogens, or as a partner I once had called them, the hallucinogens. Anyway, are these drugs that make you hallucinate? They might. You could hallucinate here. Will they cause auditory and sensory distortions? Yes, that they will do. But, true, frank hallucinations, I don't know so much. I've seen a few of them, but it's not been the norm. Anyway, I'm not trying to say these drugs are safe or they're not dangerous, but they're categorized as hallucinogens, and they do many other things. And right now, we are awash in them. LSD is still around. The big thing nowadays is don't take a full piece of blotter paper, which is what you got on the right there, right? You cut the blotter paper up into quarters and you microdose it. So instead of 100 micrograms on a piece of blotter paper, you're doing 25 mics. Okay, so the effects of the hallucinogen are milder, more, if you will, antidepressant, which is really kind of the end game here for a lot of these people, is they want to deal with depression, anxiety, mood. It could be actually a plethora of other things tied to mood, but that's what the intended goal is here. And there are some interesting websites out there, mothers who microdose. It has become affiliated with middle-aged women at the moment, this whole microdose thing, but likely will spread. And you can do it with mushrooms. You can do it with LSD. You can try ayahuasca, which is dimethyltryptamine, which is the basic or core of what is mushrooms. So they all do the same thing, mild kind of effects. All right. Now, you can get more potent ones, but right now it's the mild to moderate impacting hallucinogens are what is being sought out. The Amanita mushroom, which is the red-capped one, as compared to the brown kind of skinny crowned one, which is psilocybin. Yep, they'll do it too, a little bit differently. There's a little bit of a different mechanism and different analytes in them, but they'll get you kind of to the same place. They're a little bit unpredictable, but because quality control is non-existent, and potency obviously varies quite a bit. Where this all goes, the administration just Trump himself said, "Hey, let's go and research this." Fine, good, all right. I know that there's pharmaceutical products in the hopper right now, coming from established big pharma companies that are all running to the same door right now. Is, hey, let's get our first psilocybin-based drug approved by the FDA. We'll see. But the ultimate goal is to reset the levels, neurotransmitter levels that we have for serotonin, which is our mood regulating neurotransmitter. There we go. There's true psilocybin mushrooms there. So you crush those up, put them in a capsule. You can make a tea. You can smoke it, I guess, but not the best way to go. They're odious tasting, apparently, and you have to go through what might be a period of maybe a half an hour of upset stomach. You may even throw up, vomit. There might be emesis, but after that, hey, then kind of the if you will, the entactogen experience occurs. So you can kind of characterize these drugs as having entactogenic properties, adaptogenic properties. So one that helps me connect to people and other living things. Another one that might help me kind of adapt to my surroundings and situation a little bit better. You can mix them up with some stuff called nootropics. And I don't know if my camera's working, but like this one here I snagged not too long ago. It's called Absolute Focus. And it's not a hallucinogen, but it's sold by people that sell hallucinogens. And it's got some interesting stuff in there. The one thing that caught my eye is some stuff called ardafinil. It was not a controlled substance, ardafinil, but it's related to modafinil and sildenafil. These are prescription drugs that create supposedly, they're called nootropics, but they call them brain speed, I guess the best way to put it. Your body's not sped up and working faster or harder, but your brain is. So it's processing information a little bit more quickly and more clearly. And they're used to treat shift sleep disorders. That's modafinil, I think in particular. But yeah, so this one has a closely related, unregulated, uncontrolled version of that. And then it's got just a few other things that are just really kind of throwaways. And then, of course, glutamate, which is panacea for everything nowadays. So I just found that interesting. Just shagged it a couple weeks ago as a a desktop little toy. Okay, so there we go. The hallucinogens, microdosing. I think we've got you spun up there, and then red cap, white cap, and there was one last week that first time it showed up on kind of the menu here, and it's one that grows off the bark of a tree that looks, lion's mane. There you go. That's what it was, because it looks like a lion's mane. So another one that is probably muscimol and ibotenic acid related, not working the same way as psilocybin, but they get you to the kind of the same destination. Ketamine. All right. Dissociative anesthetic, right? Used in medicine, effective drug. We see it now in pain clinics. We see it used in these ketamine or wellness clinics where you can get a drip or a mucosal absorbed version of ketamine, and you're supervised by physicians for an hour and a half or so, up to 2 hours, to make sure you don't have any untoward side effects. Safe drug, good drug. It can, take you through this central nervous system reset. Very good. But if you take it in higher amounts than what's used in the medical setting, then it becomes very much a dissociative anesthetic akin to PCP, angel dust. So what users do is they'll take this veterinary product that's depicted here, and they'll just, break it open, pour it into a small little pan, and they'll boil it. And as they boil off the liquid, what they're left with is a white powder. And that white powder can then be snorted. And you get, you're getting all the ketamine all at one time. And that will take you through a dissociative experience, a PCP-like experience. And it can be very deadly. We have the Matthew Perry case out here in Los Angeles. And he died in a hot tub, and for some reason water is very attractive when you're high. I remember a case we had with a fella that had taken, well, it was PCP, but this was just a summation of what can go wrong here. Is he warms up, he gets into a pool, dives into the pool, and drowns, and found that his fingers were all scrubbed down, bloody, because he was clawing at the bottom of the pool, thinking he was at the top, trying to get out from the water. So down is up is down, is kind of the way the world turns when you're under the influence of a dissociative anesthetic. You're not managed medically, and these things can happen. Can be a very dangerous drug. On the street, called vitamin K. People who get high using ketamine, they're searching out the K-hole. And the K-hole is that spot when you suddenly become detached from your surroundings. Now, another parenthetical here is dextromethorphan, DXM, cough syrup. It will do the exact same thing. It'll take you to that K-hole spot. You just have to drink a fair amount of it. So you can take a 250 milliliter bottle of dextromethorphan in cough syrup, or it's usually a cough syrup cold remedy. Drink that. It will bring you to kind of the same point as you'll hit with ketamine or PCP. So I just put that out there as just a note. Hey, we must always keep an eye out for what over-the-counter drugs can do here in our world. And DXM, dextromethorphan, is at the top of the list. Diphenhydramine, which is the active ingredient in Benadryl, it's an antihistamine. And then related to it, some stuff, doxylamine, which is a ditto. We see that like Unisom and the sleep products. They all, especially if you add them in with some other depressant drug, you're going to get yourself into trouble. Okay. All right, the K-hole. Pink cocaine. Here, just a note on pink cocaine. it's still around. It was a drug coming out of Mexico and South America. It wasn't cocaine at all. It was ketamine, usually, with a sprinkle of MDMA in it. So if you find this in the club scene, okay, pink cocaine. So if you hear that, it's not going to be cocaine. It's going to be ketamine with, you might have a little amphetamine in there. So I'd throw that in there because ketamine was the critter responsible for the bad things happening there. So are we going to see some derivatives, variants of ketamine? Potentially. There's a couple out there. S-ketamine, it's an analog of ketamine. You might, but right now it's just ketamine. It's easily divertible and easy to configure it to get it, ready to be snorted. Just boil off the contents and bingo, you got ketamine to go. All right, I mentioned these in the outset, the opening, Kratom and its semi-synthetic derivatives, if you will. Tianeptine is a prescription drug, and I think you should be testing for this because it's not a controlled substance in the United States. There are some states that have controlled it, but at the federal level, no. Same with Kratom. Some states have controlled it, but the feds have not, and they are unlikely to do it. Doesn't appear that they have any appetite for this. Okay, Kratom itself probably wouldn't cause any of us, indigestion. Just from a practical perspective. But these minor alkaloids, they're minor constituents in terms of percentage, but they are super potent. And they are 7-hydroxy, that's 7-OH, and mitragynine pseudo-indoxyl. Those two they are at the level of fentanyl in terms of their ability to lock onto those opiate receptors. So we've seen these products, just plain up 7-OH products appear out there in the market, sold, in bodegas, and they are potential killers. So you really need to be testing for mitragynine in this day and age because of the fact that it's not controlled, and we have these derived minor constituents that are extremely potent. Okay, so gas station heroin for Kratom and Tiana for Tianeptine. Okay, got to ask your lab to add these to your panels. Some of the commercial products are depicted there on the right. Neptune's Fix got into a fix here a couple of years ago. I think it was metals, heavy metals that were detected in it, and that was a big deal in the media. So not the fact that it was, Tianeptine, it was that there was a heavy metal in it. So anyway, got recalled by the manufacturer. That's Neptune's Fix. If you got some time, you can go check those out. But they are, both of them, the Kratom and the Tianeptine, they are active at those opiate receptor sites, and you just have to check. I think Texas has restricted at least the Tianeptine. I'm not sure on the Kratom related side of it. All right. Now we begin to kind of wrap up a little bit here. We've got the inhalants. So this is actual picture from the vehicle being driven by a guy that was being pursued by police here in California. He ultimately surrendered. You want to call passing out the wheel surrendering, but he was under the influence of nitrous oxide. And this is what was in his car. All right. So these are all pastry confection products, right? So the propellant that moves your whatever it is you're moving out of there onto your cake or cupcake is nitrous oxide. So if you tip the can correctly, like a 45-degree angle, you'll get the gas to largely be expressed without the cream. So you'll inhale the gas and you get a nitrous oxide high. just like you go to the dentist, but you get a lot more. Okay, so that becomes kind of a dissociative anesthetic, kind of like general anesthetic with dissociative anesthetic coupled together. So he would just use them and throw them in the car, in the back seat, and then that got filled up, and so he started throwing them in the passenger seat. And so the whole car was nothing but these empty canisters. All right. So laughable in a way, but there have been, myriad fatal accidents, fatalities caused by people doing this or taking electronic part cleaners, dust offs, okay, which is a different propellant. It's difluoroethane, DFE. So, but it'll do the same thing. Okay, it's essentially just you're displacing oxygen off of hemoglobin. It's a high school biology thing here. So you're just starving the brain of oxygen, and you anesthetize yourself. For some folks, hey, that's their thing. But nitrous oxide, chronic nitrous oxide use, it can be disfiguring, because the gas comes out at a temperature, very cold temperature. So the fingers get frostbitten, the lips, the tongue, the mouth, the oral cavity can all be impacted by the use of both of these, difluoroethane and nitrous oxide. And there's a pernicious central nervous system effect syndrome that it can occur with chronic exposure to nitrous oxide. It's a neurological thing that cannot be reversed. So these are not safe and kind of funny drugs. That they are dangerous and they are very easy to get. So they're tough to test for. Let me put it that way. Urine testing for nitrous oxide is near impossible. Difluoroethane you can. And so there's blood testing as well, but it's very expensive. You just need to check with your lab to say, hey, what are my options here for nitrous oxide and DFE testing, and see what they can give you and what the pricing might be, because it is just analytically a real challenge for people in our business. Okay, so you can choose to use a drug or a type of drug that is not on a testing panel. Okay, we know people with substance use disorders, they do that all the time. Okay, what am I being tested for? All right. Okay, I got that. Now, what are my options to use things that they don't test for? Okay, our folks can be very, very creative and spend a good deal of time researching this. And they'll go to websites that can help them out doing this. You've got erowid.com, EROWID.com. Although they've gotten away from providing advice like that, you can still find the stories in there about what works and what doesn't. You've got bluelight.com too. I think that's the kind of the alternative to Erowid. But there are places that people go to get advice. And then, of course, I'm standing in line, I'm in the probation office or wherever I'm at, I'm talking to somebody who says, oh yeah, I beat my drug test because I used stuff like this. Advanced detox solutions. Okay, I think this was, when it first got into our kind of discussion here, it was out of Missouri, Tennessee, that part of the country where this was popular. And so we had, a couple of different experts looked at this and said, I don't know. This stuff doesn't look like it's really much to do about anything. And so I said, okay, let me actually see what the ingredients are, and then we'll kind of go from there. Okay, so you've got the ingredients or the supplement facts, if you will, if this is even truthful, and take that with some guidance. But you can see what's in it. Okay, vitamin C, B1 and B2. Okay, so you've got and B12. I'm sorry, no folic. So it's B1, B2, B12. So you get a fairly heavy dose of the B vitamins. Okay, and then sodium and potassium, non-players. Okay, so is the vitamin C. So what do I get that would help me detox and beat a drug test out of these B vitamins? Okay, well, I'm going to likely end up urinating more. Okay, so these vitamins are eliminated easily through the kidneys, concentrated in the urine, and kick the kidneys into gear. And okay, so I've got a bit of that effect in it. You know, if I take a couple doses of these here in the course of an afternoon or evening, does that get me ready to go? Well, perhaps you're dehydrated, correct? And if you've got a water-soluble drug in your system, okay, as part of the movement of that fluid out of the body, okay, a water-soluble drug, you may reduce the kind of the levels, what might be considered like a serum level in blood. Yeah, okay. You may eliminate below a cutoff, or if you drink enough of this stuff, and let's say it's amphetamine, and you're using small amounts of methamphetamine, not every day and not 3 or 4 times a day, but hey, I used 2 days ago, and I load up with this advanced detox solution, and now I'm kind of a hyper enuresis kind of thing going on here. I'm going to the bathroom every 15, 20 minutes to urinate. Maybe. But fat-soluble drugs, THC, okay, this isn't going to really amount to much of anything. So, and if I am dehydrated, okay, I am going to my specific gravity and perhaps my pH, but my specific gravity is going to be altered if you're doing stability testing with, let's say, an instant testing device. So you're going to have, and it's going to be clear white. Even though the yellow, you're going to have a kind of a yellowization of your urine from the B12, but still, it's not going to be a stable specimen. Okay, so I guess, and this is just one of many products that kind of is working around this same kind of core theme here, is by injecting supplements into the body. And some of them use minerals, a lot of chromium, in their magnesium. That's likely just to give you, cause diarrhea more than anything. But they will get you to an end state where you're somewhat dehydrated, and that may alter detection levels of particular kinds of drugs. So you can always come to us and Tomo, both of us folks, because we collaborate, and we can tell you, if you give us a product, what you're dealing with. So just send us a name, and we'll do the homework for you. Okay, and we'll get you with an expert in our house that can walk you through it. So we've got additives. Those are usually detected too. If you add, some people add solvents to, I don't know why I do it, because it's a telltale odor associated with that. You can use a chromate in there, but that's going to trigger a stability assessment. So the additive thing, baking soda, ditto, is going to change your pH. So really, whatever road you want to take on an additive is going to get you, to a point of detection. Substituted urine, we all know what those are. We all probably have some good stories. You guys have the good stories, and gals have good stories about that. The cleansing is what we just went through here with detox and chelation, which really isn't what's happening here. We're not chelating. We're just, by diluting urine, we make water-soluble metabolites a little bit more difficult to detect, just temporarily. Alternative drugs, that's the big one. I'll just use things that they're not testing for, especially when you look at kratom, tianeptine. If you're using delta 8, delta 10, delta 11, any of these semi-synthetic cannabinoids, many labs cannot detect those. So yep. So you get a get out of jail, or hall pass out of those potentially. Abstinence, of course, we know that's foolproof, but of course nobody ever wants to do that. And then conventional wisdom here, folks. I like Irowid. It's free of charge. there's just about anything you could possibly want to know about drugs of abuse and how it impacts people, you'll get it there. Somebody gives you a street name for a drug, Wazoo. Okay, what is Wazoo? So I'll go to Arrowhead, you type in Wazoo, and anybody that who's a member of this huge population of contributors who's used Wazoo, they'll put the whole experience in there. I started at 6 p.m. At 6:05, I first experienced this. It's clinical. It's phenomenal and very honest and forthcoming. Just about anything you could want to get that would add to your expertise or help you explain a particular thing that you're hearing or seeing, you can get out of Arrowhead, and to some extent Blue Light as well. I think Arrowhead's a little better, but Blue Light's also free. And so I would just keep those, hey, in your browser because, hey, it's simple to use and doesn't cost you a penny. Okay. So, all right. Panel options. This is what I let the pros deal with. So Angela and Shayna and our people are the folks you want to talk to about all of this, but just making sure, hey, the drugs that I'm concerned about are drugs that I'm actually testing for. Okay, and that you keep up with what's going on in the news and trainings. Through Tomo, we again, as partners, we make training available, widely available for topics like this, and specialty topics are always available and can help you out with any kind of consultation you need. You want to run something down to us, hey, simple to do. We're happy to do it. So just have these conversations, though, with your provider to make sure that you're testing for the right things. Okay. And there you go. There's Shayna. I may have been on the call. I think she was out today. But there's her contact info, and I bet you Angela will give you hers too. And there's mine. So simple one there at abbott.com. And I am easy to find. So happy to help you out with anything.
All right. Thank you, Don. That was great. That was really good. I do think we maybe have time for one question. So I got a question about GHB. Are you seeing an increase in individuals using GHB? And how would you recommend to best test for it?
Yeah, GHB, I'm sorry. I should have dealt with it when we were at the inhalants because I usually add it in there. But we are not. Here's the thing with GHB. I don't think that just from a kind of a nationwide look at GHB, we've seen an increase. I think awareness has increased, though, however, in the last 4 or 5 years with this drug as a drug used in drug-facilitated sexual assault, but also as its own kind of alternative to alcohol, or alcohol-like highs without all the alcohol fallout. Okay, GHB has two precursors, gamma-butyllactone (GBL), and some stuff called 1,4-butanediol, 1,4-BD. All three of them are out there and on the street. Okay. And there are tests for it. I know, for instance, us folks at Abbott, we've got a good test for GHB. And if they're using any one of those three, GHB or the two precursors, they'll be detected. I think it warrants probably testing periodically for GHB, adding that into kind of a broader or expanded panel. And people that abuse GHB that is their drug of choice till the final bell rings. You won't get them off GHB to go to cannabis. You won't get them off GHB to try a hallucinogen. No, GHB is their thing, kind of like nitrous oxide and difluoroethane. So I don't think we're seeing real movement in terms of more people using it. I think there's a much greater awareness, though, of what this drug does.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for attending. I believe you have everyone's contact information. So if you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks for coming, everybody.